Good day, everybody. This is Balam Solis, and I'm here with another episode of Power Apps or Power Platform in Higher Ed. This is a continuation or part two of my previous episode where I showed you how you can take content submitted from a Microsoft form for groups that includes file attachments and move all that information, including the file attachments, into a Sharepoint list. And the intent is now to build an application, a Power App, that helps the users process that information and create a centralized, more accessible, and efficient repository to continue to process all those program applications. Of course, you can apply this to almost any kind of scenario, and it doesn't have to be a higher ed kind of application. But in this case, I'm trying to shed some light into how we're using this at a higher ed institution. So let's get ready for part two, where we will be doing the completion of this. But first, here's our intro. Okay, so first and foremost, I have to say that the previous episode was greatly made possible by the awesome April Dunham, who had created a very similar video. In her case, she was handling individual forms, and the process relied on OneDrive for Business. In this case, I am using group forms, and because of that, the information is also being managed at a group level in SharePoint. If you haven't seen that first video, find it someplace, wherever it is, that you can click to see the other episodes in my series to see how this whole system is set up. What we're going to do now is to create a Power App that lets the team more effectively process those applications and have all that information at their fingertips. So let's take a look. What we have here is the SharePoint site where all this information is being collected. And I just want to share some of this with you as a recap, if you wish. So all that information in terms of attachments was submitted by forms, and each form, which is a group form, has a appropriate folder. And each of those folders corresponds to an attachment question associated in the form that was used in the process. So question, the folder called question, holds the content submitted through the first question that had an attachment component to it, and the second folder is mapped to that second one. So in this case, we have letters of recommendation associated with question one, and we have the resumes associated with question. Let's take a look for a moment at our applicants list. So I added more applicants to the list. Recapping, this column here is set to, by default, whenever a new record is created, to set the application status to pending. That way, it doesn't have to be done by anybody, nor the submitter, obviously not the person processing this. It's done automatically. And here in the attachment section, we have two documents attached. We have the letter of recommendation and the resume for that particular applicant, which in this case is a fictitious internship program. So how do we build an app to manage the process from here? We're going to go to make.powerapps.com. And yes, this is the new way to start creating applications. I'm going to do this from the ground up so that we get a better sense of what this looks like. So I'm going to go to our standard create environment, and I'm going to use a blank app. Because most of these applications are going to be managed at a desktop, I'm creating this as a blank app, but also in tablet format. I'm calling this my MCAN management app, and I'm going to hit create. Okay, so we have a blank app. The first thing we need to do is to connect our data to it. I look for Sharepoint. I connect, and then I have here my Maya no-code developers, and then I have the lists that I could work with. So I'm going to select my MCN applications list. The other connector I'm going to add here to facilitate communications with the applicants is going to be our Outlook 365 connector. So with those two in hand, I can start now building. The way I have envisioned this app is to have a gallery on this side that will show me the applicants and then the relevant applicant information on this side. And I am hoping to make this a one-stop screen where I don't need to navigate into 20 different spaces to do this. So the first part is relatively easy. I'm going to add a vertical gallery, and I'm going to connect it to my applicants. Now for this gallery, you see some of the things are already there. It has the name of the applicant, the program. There's two programs, the beginner's program and the advanced program. I don't have pictures for the applicants, so I'm going to change the layout for this to title, subtitle, and body. All right. And instead of mapping the applicant's email on their third field, I'm going to choose this item's approval status. With that, I pretty much have my gallery set up, but I don't need all this space. I'm going to need this real estate to develop the processing component, which will be a form. So I am going to select the vertical gallery by clicking anywhere on the gallery itself, except the top row, and I'm just gonna bring this down to where it makes sense. And then secondly, this is just a personal thing. I don't like the scroll bar interactions. I prefer my navigation interactions, so that pops up in there. So with that, we got our list of applicants. Let's see how we get the details after I save. Okay, now I have created my gallery here that shows all my users. It highlights the user that is currently selected in the gallery. How do we look at their information? So let's go into that. I want to create an experience here where the user doesn't need to navigate to multiple screens to do what they need to do so that they can efficiently get to the things they need to do and do this quickly. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a form that contains the information for each applicant, but then we're going to use this form in a slightly different way from what we're used to. So let's get to that. I'm going to insert a form. Here's my form, and I'm going to do two things. I'm going to rename it. And just for clarity, right, this is an edit form. It's not a details form because good friends don't let friends use the details form. Our data source for this is going to come from our list. And so here we have the basic layout of this form. Let's tie it to the item that it should display. So we go to items, and we tell it that what we basically want is to show the information of whatever applicant is selected in the gallery. So we do our gallery name and then just choose selected. And you see immediately here, you see Maria's information. Now, for this particular use case, we don't want whoever processes their application to mess around with their name. We want to have maybe the opportunity to reassign them to a program if they did not calculate or did not assess their own capabilities appropriately. We don't want them to change their email, but we do want them to change their approval status, and we want to only have them access their letters of recommendation and their resume, but we don't want to even accidentally delete those attachments. So here's a super easy way to get a lot of these customizations in, and that is by going into the fields. So for the full name, we actually don't want to have them edit the text. So we're only going to say view text. For the program, that is one we want them to change, and we're going to assign to this a pull-down menu. And we will get back to this to customize what that pull-down menu will look like. For their email, actually, all we want the users to do is to be able to view their emails. And actually, if you look at this here, now it's a live link so that when they click on this, it can fire up an email to that applicant if they need some further information. Lastly, we do want them to be able to change the approval status, but we're going to create a custom, here, we want them to be able to change the approval status, but we're going to create a custom interaction here, and you will see why shortly. And lastly, all we want them to be able to do with the attachments is to actually view the attachments. So at this point, we have changed the shape of our form in the way that it makes only those interactions we want possible, and we limit people's ability to mess around with the rest of the data. We want to change the order a little bit. We want to have the applicant, and I don't know why Power Apps does this, so we want to have the name first. Sometimes it reorganizes the stuff when I move it around, and I don't know why. Their email, the program that they have been assigned to, the status, and then the attachments. So we have those pieces in, and I'm going to expand my approval status there. Okay, so this is looking great. And notice we are not going to, in this solution, even assign any kind of buttons to trigger whatever next steps we want to take. So we're going to get to that in a moment. Let me reorganize the content here because there is an ugly scroll bar there. Obviously, these are all samples, so they don't match the applicant's name. All right. So far, things are looking good. Let's first take a look at what we're going to do with our program dropdown. We do need to assign values to this dropdown. And by the way, I'm going to need this information later. So I'm going to rename it while I'm here because data card value 16 doesn't tell me much and it's hard to remember. So I'm going to call this dropdown program. That's easy to remember. Now, what are the values allowed in this dropdown? We're going to need to unlock this card first and then assign the values. So the program is either beginners or advanced, right? And because I changed the content of this while I was defining the fields in the fields properties, also the other thing that is important is the default value. And if you look at the default value, of course, we want it to preserve whatever the parent record brought to it. All right. Now, let's say I am going to move James or Jaime Clavel from his current status of beginner to advanced. I am going to use a property of the dropdown, which is onChange. So if I change the value, I want to update the database. And I'm going to use my patch command for that. So the patch command for that onChange property is this. So what do I want to patch? It's the database. What record do I want to patch? Okay, so I can use this item, comma, the program column with the value that I have selected in my dropdown. All right, so let's test this with Jaime. So we choose Jaime here. We notice that Jaime is in the beginners program. And by the way, I do need to I need to correct my values here. Right, my items are actually misspelled. So let's look at this again. Okay, so Jaime is in the beginners program. Manuel is in the beginners program. So let's look at Jaime again. We're going to take beginners and we're going to move him to advanced. And you see, after a moment, this has changed to advanced. So we're good. We didn't have to do a lot of complicated saves and find buttons and create new buttons for this. We're saving a lot of time there. The second thing we want to do is, rather than having the approval status as a text field, we want to replace this interaction with radio buttons. Okay, so here we go. We're going to select the data card and we're going to go to our insert and do radio. Unlock and add. There we go. We notice from the get-go that these things are set up to vertical. So that's not such a nice layout for this. Not very useful. It's going to take up a lot of space. So we're going to go to layout and change that to horizontal. Nice. All right. Now the values, obviously, we don't want the values to be 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? We want values to be related to what we're doing. So we go back to our items. And just like we do with pull-down menus and others, we can say here, pending, approved, or declined, right? We also need to rename this component. So RB for radio button, approval status. All right. Lastly, the default value. We want this to be whatever parent value we had for it. So with this ready, we can now delete this entry box. So highlight and just push delete on my keyboard. And I knew, and you probably also know this, that this creates 2 errors. Let's correct those errors. The first error is associated with the fact that when the form is submitted, it's gonna update the approval status. It just needs to know with what. So for the approval status, we want to use the radio button approval status dot selected dot value. So we took care of that. Now let's correct the error. This error is connected to this Y property, and the Y property is associated with the potential error message that might show up if, for example, this was a mandatory field or something else went awry with the submission of those data. So you can see that this is error message 11, which is associated with the approval status. And it's telling us that its Y coordinates are associated with the thing we deleted earlier, that text box. So all we have to do is do this, change it to the Y position of the radio buttons plus the height of the radio buttons, and that has gone away. So at this point, we have both of these things added to our form. Now, I tried really, really hard to do these as patches, but because I want to do something else, and that is I want to send an automatic email message letting people know that they have been approved, I was having a horrible time getting that done. So instead, what I ended up doing was this. I'm going to take a property of the radio buttons, and I'm going to use their unchange property. So whenever I go to approve, I want to update my database. So what I'm going to do here is then say that unchange, we're going to submit the form. And which form? We only have one, our applicant's form. Okay, that's all it takes to update the data. So let's test it now. We run it, and with the Jaime, we're going to put him back in the beginners group. And now we're going to approve his application. And that's reflected here. So we have Maria and Jaime are being approved. But here's the thing that would be really nice. We would like to also, the moment we approve it, send an email out to the applicant. However, that email cannot be the same if we approve their application or if we decline their application. So this is probably the more complex part of this whole process. Let's look at how that would change. So I'm going to put these two back into the pending category. To make sure that whatever message goes out has the latest information, I'm going to take advantage of the unsuccess property of the form. So in other words, once the data has been successfully submitted, this is where I want to send that email. So this is the way we do that. Unsuccess. So once the form is successfully submitted, I'm going to create an if statement. If our radio button approval status dot selected value equals approved, then what? We want Outlook to send an email. So here's the structure you look at. We have this. So the next question is to whom? And we want that email to go to whatever record we're looking at, which we gain from the person that's highlighted in our gallery. So we ask for gallery applicants dot selected dot applicant's email. Great, so we have the to section. Now I'm going to go away for a moment and start typing the message we want to say, the subject of the message. Okay, your application to the no-code intensive program. That is the subject, right? Now let's go for the body. So let's start typing the body that is personalized. So dear, and we get again from the gallery the full name of the applicant, like Maria Maria. We want to have that concatenated with a comma and also a carriage return. The purpose of this letter is to let you know that your application has been, and then this is where we leverage the content of our radio button again. And since this is right now going to happen when it's approved, it says approved, and in the last part, we then say, okay, you have been approved, and now, because we may have changed them from one of the programs that they have applied to a different program, we want to make sure that they know that they will be participating in whatever program their record values are reflected. And then, of course, we want to have a congratulations message. Okay, so what if their application has been declined? So that's our next value here, where we say, so if on the other hand, their application has been declined, then we start again with this. We can copy and paste all this part here, up, down to here. The purpose of this letter, we go here. Okay, so the second part looks pretty much like the same one. All the way through here, we now look at the value. If it has been declined, then Office Outlook will send an email to the selected applicant in the gallery email. I'm going to say your application to the no code intensive program. That's the subject line, and dear, personalized by the applicant's full name. Line break. The purpose of this letter is to let you know that your application to the program has been declined. This value should match that. We're sorry, but at this time, we can't include you in our program, we hope, and you can, add some more niceties here. The nice thing about this whole solution is that you can very efficiently go from one applicant to the other one. Let's see, we just go here, we update this database to, we're gonna move him to the advanced program, and then gonna send the email to his current college. So we click on approved, and I don't know if you saw the ants, but they went over there. Okay, so here's what my sent email looks like. This came from my Outlook sent items. And you can see here, Dear Jaime, the purpose of this letter is to let you know that your application has been approved. You will be participating in the advanced, I should have said, program, but you get the point. Congratulations. Let's check on a declined. I'm going to take Yuri, and Yuri did not quite fulfill the requirements. So let's take a look at what happens there. I'm going to click on declined. Now you can see from my outbox, this went to Yuri Salome, JSC, And this is the personalized message for her, right? Purpose of this letter is to let you know that your application to our program has been declined. We're sorry, but at this time we can't include you in our program. We hope, ba 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 ba. You get the point. So let's recap here for a second. Between this episode and the previous episode, remember, look it up wherever these episodes are found on your screen. Remember to subscribe if you liked it, by the way, and, give me a thumbs up. But you have an end-to-end solution that not only lets you intake applications, requests, whatever it might be, but also it lets you efficiently process them through a Power App. So your applications come through a form, use Power Automate to move them into SharePoint. You have a one-stop solution to look at the applicant's files, and then a very quick and efficient way to communicate with your applicants. So I hope you have found this useful, and I look forward to seeing you around. This is the way you can get in touch with me, either via LinkedIn or via Twitter, also known as X these days. I still will not say this is the way you can X me. That doesn't quite sound good. And I'll see you around. Cheers.